Monday, June 28th. This morning, we're looking at a new threat to an already shaky ceasefire. We'll have the latest as the U.S. and Iran launch new strikes, and President Trump once again threatens Iran's existence, saying the U.S. military may have to finish the job.
Then, how Trump is becoming his own worst enemy here at home, hurting his agenda and his party with his fixation on things like vanity projects and non-existent voter fraud, while ignoring real concerns like inflation.
And it's potentially a historic week ahead for the Supreme Court. Congressman Jamie Raskin and Andrew Weissman will help us break down the cases that could directly impact your life, including one that could define who gets to be an American. So grab your coffee, settle in, and welcome to the weekend.
Welcome to the weekend. I'm Eugene Daniels, along with Jackie Alemany and Laura Barone Lopez, who is in for Jonathan this morning. We begin this hour with the latest threats to peace talks between the United States and Iran as both sides continue to trade attacks. Iran's military today said it launched drone and missile attacks targeting Bahrain and Kuwait and threatened a, quote, complete halt to talks to end the war. It all came after the United States continued attacks on Iran for a second day on Saturday. The U.S. military said it conducted airstrikes on multiple targets in direct response to an Iranian attack on an oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz earlier Saturday. In a social media post following the strikes, President Trump said the U.S. had struck Iranian missile and drone storage locations and coastal radar sites for, quote, violating the ceasefire agreement again, exclamation point. And he warned, quote, there may come a point when we are no longer able to be reasonable and will be forced to militarily complete the job that we very successfully started. If that happens, the Islamic Republic of Iran will no longer exist. Joining us now is David Rode, MSNOW, senior national security reporter. David, a lot of this feels like Groundhog Day, as our friend Jonathan Capehart would say. I want you to talk about where we are with the latest, especially when we continue to see the president essentially say that he would bomb Iran out of existence, which I think we should all allow ourselves to continue to be surprised by the president of the United States using language like that.
So the broad dynamic is that Iran is essentially saying it will control the Strait of Hormuz. This all started with Iran attacking a ship that was moving through the strait close to Oman. That's the country to the south of Iran that controls the coastline on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz. And this shows that Iran, this memorandum of understanding, which had vague language in it, it was essentially that Iran would, with its best efforts, facilitate the movement of ships through the Strait of Hormuz. That doesn't mean Iran was giving up its claim over the strait. And what it wants to do is eventually charge fees to ships that pass through the Strait of Hormuz. In the past, it was an open waterway. That would give Iran vast amounts of money to rebuild the missile stockpiles, which it's already started doing, that were part of the focus at the beginning of this war, and strengthen this regime. So this is sort of in my view, a worst case scenario for the administration. Iran's leaders are not more moderate. They're as hardline or maybe more hardline than ever, and they seem emboldened now. On one positive note, the strikes that Iran carried out, they were targeting U.S. bases. The Iranians said there were no injuries to U.S. troops. But the broader dynamic is very concerning in terms of reopening the Strait of Hormuz and the cost of gas in the U.S. and around the world.
David, last Sunday, we were sitting here watching J.D. Vance and other members of the Trump administration shake hands with our diplomatic allies, meeting in Switzerland with the Iranians to hash out a diplomatic path forward. Now, today, we are on day 4 of escalated hostilities. What happens next?
There should be technical talks continuing. I believe they're supposed to start today. And these were lower level officials, but they are American officials. They're from the Department of War, the Department of Energy. They're experts on Iran's nuclear program. And we'll see if those talks go forward. But the broader dynamic is that Iran is not at all cowed. Again, before the war that President Trump chose to launch, Iran had never taken control of the Strait of Hormuz, the most important energy waterway in the world, as viewers have heard over and over again now for months. And so then they're trying to continue that to show that they're not backing down and they are attacking ships that are not doing what it wants, taking the route that Iran wants through the strait. So there's no progress here. And I just want to say, lastly, look, trying to, bomb Iran into annihilation is a horrific, statement by the president of the United States. But I just want to say, I don't think it will not work. We have bombed Iran, tremendously through the beginning of the war. And barring, some kind of operation involving U.S. ground troops, I don't see this regime, giving up simply by bombing. And that this is the strategy that President Trump has tried since the beginning of the war, and it hasn't worked.
MSNOW's David Rowe, thank you for waking up and helping us at least try to make sense of what's happening here with this war with Iran. Thanks, Ben. As his war with Iran continues to spiral here at home, we saw once again how the president can't get out of his own way, often making things harder for himself and his party. Case in point, the economy. Inflation hit a 3-year high in May due to high gas prices from his war in Iran, as affordability continues to be the most important issue to voters. But this week, Trump scrapped a planned signing of a bipartisan housing bill, denying congressional Republicans a win right before the midterms and choosing instead to demand that they first pass his bill targeting federal elections.
And now we have to pass the Save America Act to protect our sacred American elections. And you're fighting the Democrats and a few Republicans who are doing a tremendous disservice to this country. We have a few Republicans that are fighting it. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. You should call her and tell her to get on the ball. She'll never win another election, I can tell you. She's got to vote.
Just remind you need 60 votes to pass that bill, so it's not just Lisa Murkowski. Joining us now, Eugene Robinson, Eugene, as we like to call him here, MSNOW political analyst and Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, and Jeff Mason, White House correspondent for Bloomberg. Thank you both for coming to the table. Jeff, I want to start with you. Is there any concern from Trump and the White House about how they're seeing Iran deal with the Strait of Hormuz? Not just the actual bombing of it, but the idea that they want people to go through the Strait of Hormuz the way they want them to, and this idea of making people pay for security through the strait.
Yeah, I mean, I think that concern is underlying this entire set of talks, and David laid it out really clearly in his last segment. I mean, this was not an issue before the war. And now the president and his officials have essentially been trying to put the genie back in the bottle with regard to the Strait of Hormuz and control of that strait and generally about oil passage in that region, all of which, again, were not an issue before the war started. If you look closely at the list of points in the MOU, a lot of it is about the Strait of Hormuz. There's not a lot about the nuclear program. That, of course, is also something else that's on the agenda for that 60-day set of talks that's going on now that David was referring to. Yeah. But a lot of it has to do with just getting back to the status quo.
But they don't seem to understand that, they did it. They taught Iran that this is how that they can use this leverage.
Yeah, I mean, now, look, it looks like we're in an incredibly precarious position that this war could restart at any moment, if you even call this a pause. But Eugene, as that's going on, the president desperately wants to get this war over with because he's well aware of the impacts on the midterms, on his party. At the same time, though, as Eugene was laying out, he's not doing himself any favors because whether it's the FISA bill, whether it's saying no to a hearing and vote on his national intelligence director pick, or whether it's the housing bill, the president across the board is saying no to all of these things that could potentially help his party, all in order to get some control over the elections, to get that bill passed to get the bill passed that requires documentary proof of citizenship.
Right. All of this is what happens when you deliberately avoid having anyone around you who will tell you, no, that's a bad idea, and explain why and stick to their guns. There's nobody like that around Trump now, so he just follows his instincts. And as we know from years and years now, his way of operating is he gets up in the morning and he decides, this is what we're going to do. There's no sort of long-term strategy involved, as hard as that is to comprehend in a president of the United States. That's where we are. And so, yes, he's in the situation where he's doing self-harm. And he has done enormous self-harm to the world economy by, as Eugene said, teaching Iran that, gee, we can close the Strait of Hormuz, and you know what? We'll get away with it. And this is not a small deal for the world economy. So Trump will again be under pressure to do something about it. But what's he going to do? More bombing is not going to work.
And I mean, as Laura pointed out, it's clear that Trump's priority right now is not any of these other pressing issues that are becoming political liabilities for him, but passing the Save America Act. Let's listen to him quickly. Actually, this week, he was at the Faith and Freedom Coalition, where he talked about the Save America Act. Oh, we don't have that sought, but in this quote, I'll read it to you. We now have to pass the Save America Act to protect our sacred American elections. We're fighting the Democrats and a few Republicans who are doing a tremendous disservice to this country. We have a few Republicans that are fighting it. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, you should call her. Tell her to get on the ball. She'll never win another election. I can tell you, she's got to vote. Jeff, do tactics like this work anymore? So close to the November midterms, so close to Trump potentially being a lame duck president if Democrats take back the House? And is the White House trying any sort of, are there any backdoor conversations? Is, the legislative director trying to woo anyone in sort of a more palatable, normal way that we've seen past White Houses?
And the carrot way instead of the stick.
Yeah.
A couple of things. First of all, Lisa Murkowski won, I believe it was her last election, by basically jettisoning the Republican Party and winning on her own name recognition.
Mm-hmm.
So
she won a write-in election.
Yeah, exactly.
With the name Murkowski.
Exactly. Okay, people had to write Murkowski, and she won.
So I don't think that the president necessarily can forecast that she doesn't have a chance of winning another election based on that past history. Secondly, he did meet with Mike Johnson this last week, and no doubt there was some damage control going on there, because I can tell you from my own reporting that the day before the housing bill signing was supposed to happen, I was speaking to a White House official who was touting it to me as a major success for the administration and a major success for the White House. So I think he probably caught his own people off guard by declining to sign that the next day, and that is a political problem for him and for his party, at a time when showing a little bit of legislative success wouldn't be all bad going into the midterms. That said, and I think this is an important, to be sure, the president has almost complete control over the Republican Party. We have seen in the last few months how he can end people's political careers through endorsements and through comments. So yes, some of this looks like shooting himself in the foot, but he's got a very, very strong foot. So that's not a great analogy. But my point is, there may be some self-damage there, but he's doing okay, and he knows that, and he knows that he has that power and that strength, and he uses it electorally and politically.
Bill Cassidy and him were yelling at each other, and then Bill Cassidy changed his vote after talking to the president and his team.
I really wish we had a recording of that.
Someone does somewhere. We will get it one day. Maybe when one of these books come out. Eugene, I want to play something for you from J.D. Vance from Real Time with Bill Maher and talk to you about it on the other side. It's really interesting.
The biggest criticism I had of the 2020 election is that you had technology companies that were quite literally
stealing the election theory to kind of set himself up as a 2028 or to be able to do it his way.
Exactly. He clearly is making his bid for 2028, and he wants the MAGA coalition behind him. And so if you don't use the word rigged about the 2020 election, you got to use that word or else you're out, right? You you are, you're worse than a pariah. So he's trying to find a new way to use the word rigged. This is completely, just out of thin air, I guess. But he's trying this out and seeing if that's gonna work. Let him have it both ways. Not claim it was actually rigged, but to say it was somehow the tech companies rigged it.
And also, Trump didn't get kicked off of Facebook and Twitter and all of those until after January 6th. This was after the election.
That was after the election.
I'm not great at math, but I know months a little bit.
A couple months after the election.
We also didn't have Elon Musk in 2020 spending a record amount of money on trying to influence the election. But Eugene Robinson and Jeff Mason are both sticking with us. The conversation is going to continue after the break, where we'll hear some new sound from a former president who's got some spicy language for the current president. You're watching The Weekend. Eugene Robinson and Jeff Mason are back with us. Let's take a listen to Joe Biden, who last night had some compliments for Donald Trump.
He's diminished our standing in the eyes of the world more than any president in history has. It's not just his vanity projects, tearing down the east wing of the White House, making room for his ballroom, putting his name on the Kennedy Center, building an arch in his own honor, even hiring his own pool guy to fix the reflecting pool. Whoa, what a loser.
Obviously, it's opposite day. Not a compliment. But Jeff, when you are taking stock of your coverage of the White House for however many years you've been covering on the White House beat, I mean, is this sort of name calling and back and forth between formers and currents, is this normal? Can you contextualize this a little bit for us and what it says about this moment that we're in?
Well, yes. I mean, number one, usually former presidents sort of go off into the sunset and don't comment a lot on their successors. Certainly that's what happened with George W. Bush after President Obama came into office, and he was the first president that I covered. President Bush had received a lot of criticism from candidate Obama. They ended up having a pretty warm relationship afterwards, which you see with Michelle Obama and the former Republican president. Then, of course, Donald Trump succeeded Obama, and President Trump, as we've seen with nearly all norms in Washington, throws them out and starts criticizing the formers. The formers now sort of choose when they're going to comment on him, but that is a new trend, and seeing President Biden do that is unusual. I think I would also say, like, the presidents, all of the former presidents, met at the Obama Library just over a week ago, and President Trump was not invited, and that is also a sign of the.
We broke on the show.
Yeah, Valerie Jarrett came on the show and told us that he was not invited.
There you go, and that is an example of the discord within the club of former presidents with the current president.
And they did see it as a club, right? They saw it as a continuum. President Obama used to say that being president, you're in a relay race, basically. You take the baton, the last person, whatever party, you run 4 years or 8 years, you do your best, and then you hand it off to the next person. And it's the most exclusive club in the world in a way. And Trump has, violated all the rules of this club. So he's not a member, really. Yeah. I mean, and he doesn't want to be a member.
Yeah, but Eugene, on the substance of what former President Biden was saying, talking about those projects. I mean, those projects are a funnel for billionaires to send money to the government, and then in exchange from the Trump administration, a lot of them have gotten government contracts. So there's this profiting off of the presidency occurring. And do you think that Democrats are essentially connecting the dots for voters enough when it comes to you're not doing well at the grocery store while all of this profiting is happening by wealthy people, including the president's own family?
Look, my own opinion is that a whole lot more should be made of that, should be made of this sort of naked, visible corruption that's taking place in this administration on a scale that would have been unimaginable 10 years ago. I mean, just unimaginable. It's just out in the open. Give me $1 million for the ballroom and here's a contract, that sort of thing. Not to mention the billions of dollars that the Trump family has made on crypto and insider trading and dealings with countries that they're supposed to be negotiating with, as in Jared Kushner. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Even on the front page of the New York Times this morning, Trump cut $1 billion mining deal. His sons stand to profit.
Like, and as if we all just move on.
That's called Sunday morning. That's just a regular, that's every day.
When you look at, because I think people, voters, Americans, people in general, don't care too much about the emoluments clause during his first term because the economy was doing well. But now they're looking at the economy not doing well and how they're being impacted, and they're watching the president and his friends and the allies benefit, whether, corruptly or not, it is happening. And you look at the polling, Marist poll, Trump's handling of the economy, only 33% of people approve of it. Fox News poll, 31% of people approve of Trump on the economy. Quinnipiac, 38%. He got a big old bump. Trump job approval from Quinnipiac. Does the White House look at these poll numbers and say, okay, we need to change strategy? Because during the first term, when you were there, poll numbers did move Donald Trump, right? Bad headlines did sometimes make him back off of things. That feels like that time is gone.
A couple things on that, too. You mentioned that I've covered a few presidents. Presidents and White Houses will often dismiss polls like this, or they'll have their own internal polling, which will tell them other things. I referenced having spoken to a White House official earlier this week. That official was also saying that the polling that they're seeing about the popularity of the Iran war is much different from the public polling.
It's better?
Yes.
For them?
I don't know if that's true, but that is what they are at least saying in the halls of the West Wing, and no doubt saying to President Trump as well. But the broader question of his polling on the economy and his popularity on the economy is absolutely a political risk going into the midterms. And we saw that with Joe Biden, who over and over again tried to tell people actually things are a lot better than you're feeling, and then it didn't translate, and people didn't feel that. So that is an Achilles heel for sure going into the midterms, even as we've seen a little bit of change with energy prices now that oil prices are coming down. And yet, again, even that sort of bump is threatened by the conversation we were having earlier with regard to, is this ceasefire actually going to hold?
I'm not sure who the White House is polling, because I was just in Pennsylvania, and a lot of Trump supporters were not happy with the Iran war or the economy at all. But we have to leave it there. Jeff Mason, thank you so much. Eugene Robinson is staying with us a little longer. Coming up, Democratic energy seems to be gaining momentum with races in Texas, Georgia, and New York, fueling the optimism. We explore the possibilities next. You're watching The As the midterm elections get closer, Democrats are working to cover all of their bases and reaching voters in key battleground states. At a campaign rally in Georgia yesterday, Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff, whose race is one of the most consequential for control of the Senate, energized the crowd by tearing into his opponent, Republican Congressman Mike Collins, and President Trump.
Donald Trump and his puppet, Mike Collins. They doubled health insurance premiums for more than 1 million Georgians and threw 300,000 Georgians off their insurance altogether. Savannah, a wave is building. The kind of wave that comes once a generation, when people have been pushed too far and they decide all at once, all together, that enough is enough.
This comes just one day after Senate candidate James Tallarico took the stage at the Texas Democratic Convention and called out Republicans' culture war fixation.
They divide us by party, by race, by gender, by religion, so we don't notice that they're picking our pockets. It is the oldest strategy in the world: divide and conquer.
Meanwhile, progressive Democrats in New York City are still celebrating their victories, despite some Democratic leaders urging the party to be more moderate. That's a tale as old as time. Eugene Robinson is back with us. But Eugene, I wanted just to kind of continue with something we were just talking about, which is you heard Tallarico saying, while they're picking our pockets, distracting us while picking our pockets. So again, I mean, do you think that this messaging, when it comes to corruption while Americans are suffering, is winning over those disillusioned Republicans or the people that shifted, that aren't consistent Republican voters, but maybe moved towards Trump the last time?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it is yet, but we don't have to know right now. We have to know on Election Day, right? And the way you get a message across is you say it again and again and again. So if he continues, sort of pressing that button, hitting that nail, then we can evaluate whether it's getting across. So we'll see. We'll see if it gets. I mean, he's in Texas, Tallarico, and Texas. For election cycle after election cycle, it looks demographically like it's gonna go blue at some point. So far, it has been either, fool's gold or losing with the football or whatever metaphor you want to use. It'll be that way until it isn't, until it happens. And it's hard to know whether this is the cycle when it happens. But Tallarico looks to me to have a pretty good shot.
I want to put the new Gene on the spot, though, because if you are trying to have a little bit of a more nuanced understanding about the through line from New York to Texas. Yeah. I mean, Bernie Sanders was the headliner at the Texas Democratic Convention. Actually, let's listen to him, and then I'll put you on the spot on the other side.
We are now living in a moment in American history where a tiny number of billionaires are exerting unprecedented influence over our society. And let me tell you something. These are not nice guys. The way we defeat them, and we are seeing it now, not just in New York, but all over this country, is when ordinary people get involved in the political process. We win because we believe in solidarity.
So what is the through line? Why would they pick Bernie Sanders as the headliner here for such a competitive race featuring, the original Democratic Socialists?
Right. And and when you're trying to present as moderate, I think part of it is the populism, right? That's the through line, is that I think it says a lot about where the moderates in the party are and their lack of maybe ability to talk about populism in a way that really affects voters. There's nobody better at talking about populism and the billionaires and the millionaires. It's pretty good, right?
Yeah. the billionaires.
Well, they're very similar. But then Bernie. And I think that was what was interesting. Yeah. And I'm trying to find out from some folks in Texas why they went with Bernie. But I think that's why. They wanted someone who can help connect those dots that you're talking about.
Look at the Democratic Party in recent history and in election cycles, and in every one, Bernie Sanders has been a very significant figure. Yeah. There is a big chunk of the Democratic Party.
Young ones, is there?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Basically, the Democratic Party under 45 is, really likes Bernie Sanders.
And Tallarico has talked about young voters a lot. When I was just there with him, was that last week, 2 weeks ago? And he kept going back to young voters. So that it also may be like a young voter play as well.
Yeah.
Voters are also looking for some authenticity, right? And I think Sanders has never been accused of being not authentic and not himself. And he has kind of carried a corruption argument for a long time, which you see Democrats globbing onto. So it kind of makes sense that he's there. He also is someone who has never seemed to be afraid to go into Republican strongholds.
Exactly. He goes into Republican strongholds. He talks to people in a way that gets through, in a way that penetrates. And I for the Democratic establishment, if there is one right now, my advice would be, look, if you try to demonize 40%, half, whatever of your party, that's not a good strategy for going into the election.
Hakeem Jeffries is doing something I think really interesting, or did something really interesting. He congratulated the New York City Democratic Socialists on their wins. Quote, "Congratulations to our newest members of the NYC congressional delegation. From public servants to union organizers to community activists, the path is different, but the work is the same." We must decisively address the affordability crisis and crush far-right extremism. Now he's using exclamation points. But I thought that was really interesting because for days the conversation was, oh Lord, what are they going to do with these democratic socialists? Are they taking over?
Yeah.
And him like reaching,
that
that was me. Him reaching me in the pulpit, him reaching out and saying, no, come on in. Is big tent politics at work?
It is, and really, anything else would have been insane, really, because and also it's a recognition that a Democrat running and winning in New York is not going to look and sound exactly like a Democrat running and winning in Georgia or Texas.
They shouldn't.
They shouldn't.
Dumb
It'd be
idea.
ridiculous
Yeah.
if it's a dumb idea, right? So got to be big tent.
Yeah.
Dumb ideas, good ideas, all the ideas. Eugene Robinson, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Coming up, President Trump's political sway put to the test in Louisiana, where a Senate primary runoff was decided on Saturday. We'll get an insider's view of how it all played out next. You're watching The Weekend.
अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ गए जो दिन सहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा बेसर्द लगता है दिल का हर एक कोना अब बहुत ही दूर भरता है अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं ये जो दिन सुहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा सर्द लगता है दिल का हर एक कोना बहुत ही दर्द भरता है मेरे साए भी मुझसे अब जुदा होने को कहते हैं तुझे खोने की राहों में ये आंसू बहने लगते हैं कहाँ जाऊं कहाँ ढूंढूं मेरा वो साजो सामा तो मेरी हर एक तमन्ना तू मेरी रूह का मकान तू लकीरों में नहीं लिखा जो तुमने ख्वाब देखा था वफा की इस कहानी में फकत एक गम ही लिखा था सितारों से भी पूछता है पता तेरा कहाँ होगा मगर खामोश है दुनिया कहाँ मेरा जहाँ होगा बस एक बार मुड़ के देख ले मेरी बेबसी की सूरत मुझे है आज भी तेरी वफा की सख्त जरूरत साए मेरे तन्हा सफर बस रह गया दर्द का असर साए मेरे तन्हा सफर बस रह गया दर्द का असर